Welcome to the first video lecture of graphics and animation. 1.1/3 basically means that lecture 1 has been divided into 3 shorter video lectures, and this is the first of them. Image formation is a basic aim in computer graphics. In computer graphics, we form images which are generally two-dimensional using a process analogous to how images are formed by the physical imaging systems such as cameras, microscopes, telescopes, and the human visual system. There are 3 elements involved in the formation of an image: the objects, the viewer, and light sources. Here we have one object, one light source, and a camera, which is the viewer. The type of image that is formed will depend upon how these 3 elements are placed. For example, if we move our camera over here, we will see a different side of this object. Similarly, if we move the light source, we will see a different type of image because the intensity of light on this object will change. The shadow will also move. Similarly, there are attributes that govern how light interacts with the materials in the scene. One example of an attribute is the color of the object, which will control the type of light that is reflected from that type of object. We will come to attributes later. An important thing to note over here is that the 3 elements are independent of each other. We can move the light source anywhere we want, and the object or objects anywhere we want, and we can place the camera anywhere we want. There are no restrictions. The independence of image formation elements comes with advantages. We can separate the objects, the viewer, and the light sources, and hence we can model them separately. We can also define two-dimensional graphics as a special case of three-dimensional graphics, in which case we define the third dimension of the objects to be non-existent, and hence they will become two-dimensional objects. This also leads to simple software APIs. We can specify the objects, the light sources, the camera, and the attributes separately, and let the implementation determine what sort of image should be formed. This leads to fast hardware implementations. Let us have a closer look at the 3 elements of image formation, starting with the objects. Objects in space are independent of any image formation process and of any viewer. A set of locations such as vertices in space is sufficient to define or approximate most objects. Viewer is perhaps the most important element in image formation. To form an image, we must have someone or something that is viewing our objects, be it a human, a camera, or a digitizer. It is the viewer that forms the image of our objects, and it is the viewer which decides which side of the objects would be visible and how this object would be projected on the image plane to form an image. Without light, there can be no image. Light is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that causes a reaction in our visual system. Generally, these are wavelengths in the range of about 350 to 750 nanometers. While the electromagnetic spectrum is wide, only a small part of it is visible to the human eye, and we call this small part as light. Long wavelengths appear as reds and short wavelengths appear as blue color to us. Light sources can emit light either as a set of discrete frequencies or continuously. Geometric optics models light sources as emitters of light energy, each of which have a fixed intensity. Light travels in straight lines from the sources to those objects with which it interacts. An ideal light source emits energy from a single location at one or more frequencies equally in all directions. A particular source is characterized by the intensity of light that it emits and at each frequency, that light's directionality, and so on. We will study the attributes of light sources in graphics later. So how is an image actually formed? Let's look at ray tracing and geometric optics. One way to form an image is to follow rays of light from a source finding which rays enter the camera after striking different objects. However, rays of light may have multiple interactions with objects. A ray of light may start from a source, hit this object, then go in this direction, hit another object, and before it enters the camera or the lens, it might interact with multiple objects. Similarly, it could get absorbed by an object or it could get occluded by an object. It can also go to infinity. To summarize, not all rays of lights enter the camera lens, and not all rays of light come after a single interaction with an object. Multiple interactions and rays of light going to infinity make ray tracing a complicated process. Images are of two types, luminance and color. A luminance image is monochromatic. It only has gray level values. It is analogous to working with black and white film or black and white television. On the other hand, a color image has perceptual attributes of hue, saturation, and lightness.